And welcome back to American Agenda. I'm Heather Childers along with Bob Sellers. You know, 2020, to say the least, has been a year like no other. Yeah. Almost over. From the pandemic to the election, we have faced a lot. And joining us now is the author of this article. It's called How to Make Sure the 2020 Election Never Happens Again. Hans von Spakovsky. He's a senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Great to have you with us, as always. You're also the author of the book, Who's Counting? How Fraudsters and Bureaucrats Put Your Vote at Risk. So, Hans,
thanks for having me.
Yeah, Hans, love this article that you sent out. What was your primary thought behind everything that has happened with the 2020 election? What's the number one thing we need to make sure doesn't happen again?
Look, there's a whole series of things, and really what this election did is showed all the vulnerabilities in our election system that have been there for a very long time. The biggest thing that needs to be done, quite frankly, is to minimize the use of absentee ballots. You know, we need them for people who are too sick or disabled to make it to the polls, but all the rest of us, we should not be voting by absentee ballots because they can cause so many problems. And look, just a basic thing, every state needs to have a voter ID law that applies not just to in-person voting, but also to absentee balloting. I mean, that in itself would help reduce many of the issues that we see, the fears we have about, for example, stolen or fraudulently submitted absentee ballot.
Yeah, like the signature verification. There are a lot of ballots out there. People wonder, were they legit? One of the obstacles, obviously, is every state is kind of on its own. And that is the brilliance and stupidity of our system, right? And that way it's harder for China to come in and manipulate our whole system because you've got 50 states. Right. But can't there be a way that Congress could say, if you're going to have mail-in ballots, they must be in by this date. If you're going to have that, there must be this kind of verification. Does Congress have the power to play that role at least?
Well, they do to some extent with regard to federal elections. But remember, with all the good things they could do, there are many bad things they could do, too. I would remind you that back when COVID-19 first started and Nancy Pelosi introduced a bill to supposedly deal with this in the House, it had this whole section on elections. And one of the big provisions in it, which obviously had nothing to do with COVID-19, was a ban on any state requiring voter ID when people vote. So, you know, what Congress can do good, they can also do bad when it comes to elections in every state.
Yeah, something that I've been wondering about through all of this is the normalization of these different issues that we have in all of these elections up until this point, not just 2020. This is not the first time that we've heard about, possible flipping of votes, problems with absentee ballots, all of this. The investigations into these incidents obviously that's not been enough up until this point either.
No, it hasn't. Unfortunately, all too often when there are indications that fraud or other problems have occurred, election officials just ignore it, and prosecutors don't follow it up. I just give you a quick example of this. About a month before the election, the Public Interest Legal Foundation released a study. They had compared the voter registration lists of 42 states and the votes that were cast in those states, and they discovered that in the 2016 and 2018 elections, there were a potential over 140,000 cases of possible election fraud of people who, for example, voted twice in the same state because they're registered twice under slightly varying names in the same state, or people who are registered in two different states and took advantage of that to cast two ballots. No election officials and no law enforcement officials in any of those states have contacted the Public Interest Legal Foundation to get information on the voters in their states who may have violated the law.
Yeah, I think these are among, this conversation is going to go on, and we hope to have you as part of that also, Hans.
Thanks for watching the Heritage Foundation's YouTube channel. With more than 500,000 members, we are the nation's largest conservative research and education institution. We believe the principles and ideas of the American founding are worth conserving and renewing. Please help us further our mission by subscribing to this channel and sharing our videos with your family and friends.